Los Angeles, California, September 1993, the Sheraton Universal Hotel Ballroom, 3rd floor East Wing. The room held 412 people that evening. Producers, stunt coordinators, martial arts consultants, and the particular breed of Hollywood insider who understood that the real currency of the film industry was not money but respect. The occasion was a private industry dinner honoring the 20th anniversary of the American Martial Arts Film Guild. White tablecloths, crystal glassware, a low stage at the north end of the room with a single microphone and a podium that nobody had asked for. Steven Seagal arrived at 7:41 in the evening. He was 41 years old, 6 feet 4 inches tall, 237 pounds. He had trained in Aikido in Japan for 7 years before returning to the United States on building one of the most recognizable action careers in the history of Hollywood. His films had earned a combined domestic gross of over $900 million. He held a 7th degree black belt. 3 of the 4 men seated at the table nearest the stage had seen him train, and had said, privately, that his joint control technique was as clean as anything they had witnessed outside of Japan. He was not a fraud, he was the genuine article. And he knew it. What happened in the next 10 seconds would be discussed in training halls from Burbank to Bangkok for the next 3 decades. In 10 seconds, with 2 sentences and a single movement, the entire room would understand something about the nature of certainty that no seminar and no credential had ever taught them. If you want to know what those 10 seconds contained, stay with this until the end. He did not sit down when he entered. He moved through the room the way men move when they believe the room belongs to them. Slowly, with intention, allowing others to adjust their trajectory to accommodate his own. He stopped at the bar. He ordered water. He turned to face the room with the particular stillness of a man who has spent decades understanding the geometry of space. Chuck Norris was already there. He was seated at a table near the back, not the front. He wore a plain gray button-down shirt, open at the collar, and dark trousers. No jewelry, no entourage. 53 years old. 5 feet 10 inches. 180 pounds. He had arrived 30 minutes early and had spent those 30 minutes speaking quietly with a stunt coordinator named Gerald Hooper and a retired Marine Corps firearms instructor named Dale Yates. Nobody near the door had noticed him come in. That was not unusual. Chuck Norris had spent his entire adult life being the least visible man in any room until the moment he chose otherwise. Seagal noticed him at approximately 7:53. He moved toward the back of the room the way a tide moves, not hurried but continuous. He stopped 8 feet from the table. He looked at Chuck Norris for a moment that the people nearest to them would later describe as lasting between 3 and 8 seconds, depending on who was telling the story. Then he said it. "Chuck," he said, and the word carried the particular weight of a man who believes he is offering charity. "You're too old to fight. You should let the younger guys carry it now." Gerald Hooper set his glass down. He did not set it down the way a man sets a glass down when he is finished drinking. He set it down the way a man sets something down when he needs both hands free to pay attention. Dale Yates, seated to Chuck's left, went very still. The 2 men at the next table, a second unit director named Frank Caruso and a Japanese-American fight choreographer named Kenji Murakami, stopped their conversation mid-sentence. The sentence has never been finished. Neither man remembers what it was about. 412 people in that ballroom. Perhaps 20 of them were close enough to hear what Seagal said. But within 40 minutes, all 412 would know every word. Chuck Norris looked up from the table. He looked at Seagal for a moment without hurry. He did not push back his chair. He did not square his shoulders. He did not do any of the things a man does when he is preparing to perform for an audience. He simply looked. Then he said, "Let us find out." He stood without hurry. He removed his jacket, a dark canvas field jacket that nobody had noticed he was wearing, folded it once along the crease and set it on the back of his chair. He stepped away from the table. He walked toward the open space between the tables and the east wall where a section of the floor had been cleared for a demonstration earlier in the evening. He walked at the pace a man walks when he has already decided how the next 30 seconds will resolve and is simply giving the other party time to arrive at the same understanding. If you have found this story worth watching, take a moment to subscribe now and leave a comment below telling us where you are watching from. The next 60 seconds are what 400 people traveled across 3 decades to remember. He has already won. Seagal just does not know it yet. The cleared space was 14 feet wide and approximately 22 feet long. Hardwood floor, 3 overhead chandeliers, no mat, no ring, no referee. Just 2 men and the particular quality of silence that settles over a room full of trained observers when they recognize that something is about to happen that cannot be staged. Seagal moved into the space. He assumed a stance, weight distributed, hands loose, shoulders relaxed in the way that serious Aikido practitioners carry themselves before contact. His technique was not theater. 4 of the men watching had trained with him at some point. All 4 had come away with bruised wrists and a clear understanding of what joint locks feel like when applied by someone who knows precisely what he is doing. Seagal was dangerous. The people in that room understood this. That understanding is why what followed landed with the weight it did. Chuck Norris stood opposite him. He did not adopt a formal stance. He stood the way he always stood, feet roughly shoulder width apart, weight slightly back, hands low. He looked at Seagal the way a reader looks at a familiar text, not with urgency, with recognition. Second one, Seagal moved. He stepped forward and to the left with a lateral entry, the opening movement of an Aikido approach designed to redirect incoming force rather than oppose it. It was technically correct. It was the kind of entry that against a slower or less experienced opponent would have created the angle necessary for a wrist control or a shoulder throw. Against Chuck Norris, it created nothing. Chuck Norris did not step back. He did not step forward. He adjusted his weight by perhaps 3 inches to the right. That was all. Seagal's entry passed through the space where Chuck had been standing a half second before, and the angle that the technique required had disappeared. Kenji Murakami would later say that he had seen that kind of distance management perhaps twice in his professional life. Once in Osaka, in 1981. Once in that ballroom, in 1993. Second two, Seagal reset. He had trained for 30 years. He understood what had just happened. He adjusted. His second entry was faster, a direct line rather than a lateral arc. The kind of approach designed to eliminate the retreating step that most opponents use as a defensive reflex. Chuck Norris did not retreat. He moved forward and slightly inward, inside the geometry of the technique, to the position from which a throw or a lock is not possible because there is no leverage available at that angle. Seagal's hands found nothing to work with. A fight is not 2 men touching each other. A fight is a question about space. Who controls the distance controls the answer. Chuck Norris had been answering that question since 1964. He did not control the distance by moving away from it. He controlled it by arriving at the one position in the room where Seagal's technique had no architecture to stand on. Frank Caruso, standing 6 feet from the east wall, had both arms crossed when the second exchange ended. He uncrossed them. He put one hand flat against the wall behind him, the way a man steadies himself when the ground has shifted unexpectedly. Second 3. Seagal's third attempt was the most committed. He closed the distance with his full weight behind him. A decision born from the understanding that the first 2 approaches had failed because they had not committed fully. The logic was sound. The execution was precise. Chuck Norris waited until Seagal's weight was fully committed in one direction, then used approximately 40% of the redirecting force that a full response would have required. And Seagal passed through the space where resistance should have been and found none. He did not fall. He was not thrown, but he was suddenly 3 feet past the position he had intended to occupy, and his weight was going in a direction he had not chosen, and he had to recover his footing on unfamiliar terms. He stopped. He straightened. He stood very still. Chuck Norris stood 8 feet away. He had not raised his hands above his waist during any of the 3 exchanges. He was not breathing hard. He was not smiling. He was looking at Seagal with the same expression he had been wearing since he stood up from the table, calm, attentive, without theater. The room was completely quiet. Not the quiet of an empty room. The quiet of 400 people holding something back. Chuck Norris looked at Seagal for a moment. Then he stepped forward, not quickly, and extended his right hand. Seagal looked at the hand. He looked at it for what Gerald Hooper would later describe as the longest 4 seconds of the evening. Then he took it. Chuck Norris leaned forward slightly and said something. He said it quietly. He said it at a volume that carried to Seagal and to no one else in that room. What he said has not been confirmed by either man in any interview or public statement in the 30 years since. What has been confirmed is what happened immediately afterward. Seagal nodded once. He said, "You're right. I apologize." He said it clearly enough that the 6 people nearest to him heard every word. Dale Yates would later say that he had been present at 7 or 8 genuinely significant moments in his professional life. He placed that evening in the top 3 without hesitation, though he declined every time he was asked to explain exactly why. The fork in the road, when it comes, does not announce itself. It presents itself quietly, in the space between a man's ego and his integrity, and requires a choice that will define every story told about him afterward. Seagal stood at that fork for 4 seconds. He chose the harder direction. That choice is not a footnote to the evening. In many ways, it is the point of it. Chuck Norris retrieved his jacket from the back of his chair. He folded it over his left arm. He walked toward the exit without stopping to speak to anyone. He was almost at the door when Gerald Hooper reached out and put one hand briefly on his shoulder as he passed. Chuck Norris acknowledged this with a slight nod and continued walking. He was gone before the room had fully found its voice again. The story moved outward from that ballroom the way all true stories move, imperfectly, with details shifting in transit. In some versions, the exchange lasted 30 seconds, in others, 2 minutes. In one version that circulated through a Dallas training hall in 1996, there had been a third party involved who had issued the original challenge and disappeared before the resolution. None of these details are accurate. The true version is smaller and quieter than any of its variants, which is usually the case with events that actually happened. What does not shift across any version of the story is the ending. In every account, from every source, Seagal apologized. That fact survived every mutation the story underwent, because it was the detail that mattered most to the people who told it, not the technique, not the seconds, the apology. The willingness of a man who did not have to acknowledge anything to stand in front of 400 colleagues and say the 2 hardest words available to him. Kenji Murakami returned to Japan in 1996. He taught at a training hall in Kobe for 11 years. He told the story of that evening. By his own account, perhaps 60 or 70 times, he said the same thing at the end each time. He said, the technique was impressive. The apology was the harder thing. Chuck Norris was 53 years old that evening. He would go on to work consistently for another 2 decades. He has never, in any interview, mentioned the evening at the Sheraton Universal. He has mentioned, on several occasions, the principle that governed his approach to conflict throughout his career. That the surest sign of experience is the ability to end a thing before it becomes a thing. That a man who needs to prove something has already demonstrated his limitation. That the economy of force is not about how little energy you spend, it is about how accurately you spend it. The specific lesson of that evening is not about age. 53 is not old by any standard that matters in the world of genuine skill. The lesson is about the difference between what a man believes about himself and what he actually is when the distance closes and the moment arrives with no room left for revision. Seagal believed something about the evening before it began. By the time it ended, he knew something different. That transition from belief to knowledge is the only education worth the name. Next time we go inside the morning in 1979 when a group of Navy SEAL instructors decided to test Chuck Norris in a closed session that was never meant to become a story. It became one anyway. That episode is coming soon. You will not want to arrive late for it.